Welcome to Leverage episode 10. I have Megan Crosbie from Megan Crosbie Designs joining me today. I have definitely been someone who has not known how to reach out to a designer, what's entailed, been really intimidated in the past, don't want to bother anybody. Oh my God, it's going to cost gazillions of dollars, which by the way, it can.
Yeah.
But, there are ways that it doesn't. And I get asked all the time by clients, I'm thinking about renovating a bathroom, how much this would be. I'm thinking about, doing my kitchen. What should I do? Do you know anybody? Anyway, so I thought this could be a really fun way to kind of, ask those questions. And if you're thinking about doing any renovations, trying to figure out if you've got the budget and maybe just like what's cool and what's not this year, we'll talk about it. So Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So the biggest I want to start off by just kind of stating the differences between an interior designer and interior decorator. If you're not familiar, I'm sure you've heard both of these terms thrown around, and there is a big difference. So I thought maybe you could just explain that to everybody.
Absolutely. So I think, again, even within my definition, it'll probably be different from what other people are saying. But I would say that when you're hiring a decorator, you're looking for someone that has a really good sense of color, fabrics. They're going to help you with furnishings. They're going to work within the walls of the house that are already existing, and they're going to come up with a plan. There will be a huge price range in terms of how they can decorate it for you, and that's for you to sort of figure out with them.
Right.
When you're hiring a designer, more often, designers also do decorate, but when you're hiring a designer, more often you're looking at fuller renovations. So they're going to know a lot more about the specific details about the construction materials, about what's involved, about all the supplies or materials that they're going to source on your behalf. So when you're hiring a designer, they're going to help you, first steps often like floor plan. Which walls are going to stay? Which walls are going to go? What's going to work? Can the plumbing stacks align? And beyond that, there's also, hiring engineers and architects. So if you're building a house from the ground up, an interior designer is not going to do that for you. They're going to work with an architect, and they're going to be the ones that think about form and function in tandem.
Right.
I think architects do things I could never do, and they're amazing. But I would say that architects aren't always thinking about the aesthetic sort of functionality. They're thinking very much the lines and this and that. So the reason I would say you really want both is the designer's going to think about that, but they're also going to be thinking about how are you living in this house with your family? How does your family function? Right. What needs to work in what way? So there is a massive difference in terms of decorator and designer. With that also, hopefully the price, if you're hiring a decorator, the price should be a bit lower. If you're hiring a designer, there's going to be a lot involved. Drawings, technical things that a decorator wouldn't be able to provide you.
What would you say is like the difference between I guess the schooling behind it? Because obviously, someone who, and I know a lot of people who are amazing at it, who I walk into their house and I'm like, wow, like you could totally do this for a living. It's gorgeous, and I've had clients, selling clients home, and people ask me even if it's staged, and I'm like, no,
Totally.
and they didn't have a designer, they just did it themselves. And so I know from a decorator standpoint, it can just be as basic as someone who just has a flair for it and thinks, you know what, I just love to do what I do every day as a living, right? What's the difference between that and an interior designer?
Yeah. So again, different places in the world have different sort of regulations around this, but a designer would go to school and get the technical skills. They would also get certified as an interior designer. So you would go to school and you would have to do anywhere from 2 to 3 years, and you learn how to do renderings, you learn how to basically use all the different programs there are within that different programs, SketchUp, Revit, AutoCAD. These are technical things you don't really need to know, but a designer is going to have had to go through all of that schooling, and they're going to have to know all of that material information and be able to understand construction drawings and anything that would be necessarily provided by an engineer, and just have sort of the lingo and the understanding in that sense.
So I feel like even when you start talking about it, I know in the background, that there's different ways of working with designers, but like all of that might sound really daunting to someone who's just like, okay, well, I don't want just a decorator, right? Like I have a main floor and it doesn't really configure really well, and I want to redo my kitchen, but I want to have kind of like a more holistic look at it. And I'm looking at going, oh my God, I don't want to build a new house, right? Absolutely. I don't want to build a new house. I don't want just an interior designer, because they're not going to be able to maximize the space in the same way. And I don't want to worry about, the cost, or I just want to learn more. So what's the process? Like, are they bothering you when they call you? Do designers charge for their time for a consult? I know in my business, I wish more people would reach out, because you're never bothering a real estate agent. We're always happy to talk. We don't charge for our time. Absolutely. In that way. So how does it work, let's say?
No, I love that question, because I do think a lot of people are intimidated, and there are a lot of misconceptions about how the whole process works. And I'm not going to speak for all designers, but I would say that this is pretty standard. So first of all, most interior designers' websites are going to have a form box, an email, where you can contact them and ask the basic questions. Okay. Always happy. And I think most people would give, I always offer at least a 15 to 30 minute, what I call a discovery phone call. So if you email me and you want to set something up, give me a call. We can set up a time and we can learn about the project. And I'm happy to explain the fee structure, everything that would come after that. And every project's really different. So some projects, actually, you could hire a designer who is going to be more accredited and more capable of offering you sort of a full service and a full scope of work. Mm-hmm. But even if your project's small, there are a lot of designers that will take on smaller projects. It doesn't have to be like I'm building a house from the ground up every time.
I think that's a really important aspect because there are a lot of designers who will not touch smaller projects. There are a lot of designers who only want to be dealing with like when the builder calls to say we're building this new 5,000 square foot home. And,
absolutely.
Right.
So there's a huge range of designers, and now that we have like all these different platforms like Houzz and HomeStars and all these different things on the internet that you can research, you can kind of filter, does this designer take on smaller projects? And I think that can be a huge asset, and it doesn't have to be a massive investment. When it comes to sort of the amount of savings you'll get in not making the mistakes and deciding to just do it yourself, it's pretty much, in my mind, a no-brainer, not just because I'm in this business, but because people call me when they've made the mistakes, and it's like, oh my God, I'm here to help you fix it. But if you had just kind of done the research at the beginning, you don't have to hire the most expensive full service designer. Lots of people will do things a la carte. Lots of people will take on pieces of the project. It's just kind of being upfront and open about that communication at the beginning. And it costs nothing to make that phone call and find out.
For sure. And I think that there is an element of like economies of scale, so you're not necessarily hiring a designer to create a picture wall, for example, or you might. But I think you make a good point in the sense that, if I am going to renovate a kitchen, specifically, I would talk about a kitchen just because there's the triangle and the this and what drawer service which and once you buy your appliances, you're anywhere from, I don't know, $75,000, $100,000, depending on the size of the kitchen, without working with a designer to make sure that it's done properly, you could be flushing that money down the toilets.
Yeah,
right?
No. And I mean, if you're renovating a kitchen or a bathroom, that's an investment. I mean, I'm sure you probably say this to your clients. I think that that's an investment that you're going to see back at the end of the day. So it's good to invest in those places. Sometime, maybe not.
No. I do. I think I always I say that because I'm like, don't go out and renovate your kitchen to sell your house.
Oh,
renovate your kitchen.
No.
Renovate your kitchen to enjoy it.
Oh, 100%.
But when you do it, and I think that it's in my own personal life, I have actually delayed doing certain things because if you do it bit by bit or you do it on your own, you just end up 2 years later, you're looking and going, I could have just thrown that money in the toilet because now I'm just going to rip everything up anyway.
Totally. Hybrid of what you said. I definitely think, I agree. I definitely think that do it to enjoy yourself, spend that money for you, but that money will also pay itself back. Don't renovate your kitchen to sell. That's ridiculous. That's a big chunk of change.
For sure.
But if you're going to do it and you're doing it right, why not get professional advice?
Yes. And I mean, kitchens and bathrooms will definitely be things that buyers look at, even if it's a little bit older, but if it's well looked after. But so what would you say what are those mistakes? What have you seen? Someone comes in and tries to do a kitchen by themselves or, listen, and I have great contractors who will say, oh, I can do it.
Yeah.
Right? There are. So, I think there are, and money is so expensive. I think people are looking for ways to save money and maybe cut out that middleman. But I think they only know what they know, right? So
I think you touched on this earlier, even if for the design inclined, I have clients that love design and kind of start down that road and then they realize they're so in over their heads.
Right.
They just like call me and I'm always like, I'm a little apprehensive. I'm like, okay, like you understand like this is gonna be a collaboration and we're here to help you. Because some people really have gone a long time doing it on their own.
Right.
I have only ever had the most positive feedback of like, why didn't I hire a designer sooner? In terms of the biggest mistakes, I mean, I can point out a few mistakes that you see for sure. But I think what I would also say is that you're going to avoid those mistakes if you hire a designer. And a designer can not only help you avoid those mistakes, they're also going to help you. The cost of paying them can be offset by them helping you with smart decisions about where to spend the money in the kitchen. So like you said, appliances can be crazy expensive. And you can do a kitchen for the X and for Y. You can do a kitchen for $500,000. You can do a kitchen for $50,000.
I almost see it as a consultative, an expert consultative role, but it's similar to, those people out there who are like, I can buy a house by myself. Yeah. You can. You can. Don't get me wrong. You can buy a house by yourself. Legally, you can. I had someone on YouTube who commented on one of my videos. They're like, I've been buying houses for 10 years by myself. I'm like, and you should keep doing that. If you are an expert like investor and you know the ins and outs and you've got a great lawyer to guide you, all the power to you. Absolutely. I'm not here to tell you need one, but 99.9% of the rest of the population is not as equipped to be able to know the ins and outs. Very similarly is even a great contractor, and I've said this, you may truly, truly trust them, but there are a lot of people out there that, blindly listen. Mm-hmm. And there are so many, there's so many things like just the materials or, even asking like, I'm not sure I really love where the fridge is right. And they'll be like, no, that's what everybody does. And you're like, okay, well, he said that's what everybody does.
I think that's a huge piece of it is finding someone you can trust is a lot harder than you think. But let's say you have that perfect person that has done everyone you know's house and you super trust. All the time, contractors that I love and have used forever push back because they have a different idea of what is, normal or what is going to work. And not that they're wrong, but they're also not necessarily right. And you kind of want that person to be having that pushback and that conversation and that functional flow question that has you and your family or just yourself in mind. Right. So, big mistakes for sure. I've gone into so many homes where like the fridge doesn't have enough room to open properly because they've put it right next to a wall. They haven't been thoughtful about the counter material for their lifestyle. So they bought a beautiful marble and they got it in a honed finish, which is super popular and beautiful, but they're also perfectionists and their red wine stain is going to drive them crazy for the rest of their lives. And it's like, okay, you kind of have to know that about yourself and someone to kind of be asking those questions and saying to you, Are you the person that spills? And are you the person that has a little bit of OCD around that? And if that's you, then this is not the counter material for you. Get a quartz counter that looks like it.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a durability, it's a functionality thing. I think there's so many things in kitchens, even just like where to put the lighting properly so you're not getting a shadow over your head when you're standing at the counter, or where to put the right amount of drawers versus cabinets versus pantry versus all the different things you have to store, which to be honest is probably boring for so many people, but designers like live and breathe that. That's what they think about all day and they want to make it work as best as possible for you and they want to put the outlets in the right spot and you don't know until you go and see it.
The outlets. I'm going to tell you right now, the amount of clients I've heard who were like walked in and they're like, so what is you have to have an outlet every 6 feet?
Yeah. Well, there's like restrictions within that, can't be near water and so on and so forth.
Fair. But that sounds really simple. You're like, okay, so they're every 6 feet. Except if you haven't figured out where your couch is going or where the lighting is, or all of a sudden you've got fixtures where you don't need them, right? Yeah. They're all in the wrong spot. So now you've spent X amount of dollars. You're like, okay, well, I have a brand new kitchen. And yes, it was all done, but they're not in the right space. And now I have to figure out how to get an extra cord. And now it looks ugly. And now,
or even like people don't put them on islands sometime. And you're like, okay, so what's going to happen when you're sitting at the island and you need to charge your phone? What's going to happen when you're standing at the island and you're trying to use a beater? What's going to, like anything really. And
I do not have one on my island.
Some contractor made that decision. Yeah. And that's fine. You're going to live through it. It's not the end of the world. But wouldn't you have liked, if you spent all this money doing it, to have that done right?
No, 100%. I think it's really those small things for sure that that you're getting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to talk, so we talked about the differences, what you're getting, from a standpoint of like process. So someone calls you, they send up a 15-minute, 20-minute consult. Yeah. They're like, okay, great. We'd love to kind of book your time. Is the next step like we're committing to working with you? Yes. Okay.
So what I would always say and what I always recommend with anyone who calls me and we do that 15-minute discovery call is I would always suggest that we do an initial consultation. There's no strings attached. It's on site. It's 1 hour. I personally charge $250 for that because you can take whatever
Very
advice
reasonable.
we give.
Yeah.
I think most designers would be willing to do this. If they're not offering you that, I kind of think that's a bit of a flag, because if you have to sign a piece of paper without ever having met, like, this is going to be a personal relationship. So let's say it is a more extensive project that you're on. That project could be a year or more, and that person is going to know everything about you and how you like to live your life. You want to make sure you get along with that person.
Yeah. If your kids have a shower every day, if your marriage is going well, they know everything.
Totally. Snore room, master bedroom, like how people are living, you find out. Totally. And that's totally,
but you need to feel like you trust them. Exactly. All that being said, we don't poke into personal lives, but you are bringing this person into your daily fold, and it is so important that you feel comfortable with them. For sure.
So you would have that. For me, at least, I'd set up that initial consultation. It's 1 hour at the house again. Like, then you're seeing this space. And that's also a good opportunity. At least I like to think if I get there and I realize this is not going to be a fit, I waive the fee and I say, like, it was really nice to meet you. Thank you for your interest. Nice. This isn't the perfect, like, this isn't going to be a match made in heaven. Right. I haven't had to do that. But I always like say there's no strings on both sides. And then after that, we would get started. And from there, it's an hourly rate. So designers have a range. I'm sure it could be anything from $50 to $500 an hour.
I've never seen 50, but yeah.
But what I meant to say is most designers or many designers will have kind of a scale of themselves a senior.
Oh, right. And then they
people
have the
that work for them.
Yes. I don't think I've still seen 50, but if you got them.
I'm being optimistic. I hope they're not charging interns out at more than 50, but who knows?
No, but I think the fee part is really important. And I think that, listen, I've had stories of people who have used this designer, will go unnamed, one of the top designers in the city, who went shopping with my client at LT. And while she was there, she was shopping for someone else as well. It was very evident to her. And she got charged the full hour on her. Like, so those are and I think that this is like what I kind of want to like highlight. It's not you. It's just like, I think there are certain things that, listen to these stories, but understand that they're not necessarily the norm. I also worked with a designer that's quite well known in Toronto, and I showed up at my house, and I was only being paid her assistant's rate, like charged her assistant's rate, and her assistant was sitting on the couch while the guy installed the light. I'm like, what's happening here? Yeah. Like, you're on your phone. Yeah. Why am I paying you? Totally. So I think that, again, going back to this idea of like finding someone you trust, understanding the fee structure, there's nothing wrong with sitting down and saying, I need to understand how much you charge. Yeah. What are these things that I'm getting charged for? And are you our designer, I shouldn't say designer, do you feel it's totally in the norm to say, like, we want to do our kitchen, will you give us a range? Like, this is our budget, don't get me wrong. Because I think a lot of times, and I talk to my builder, like my contractor clients all the time, and they'll tell me what it costs to build something per square foot. And then I think where people don't understand is, where's the designer cost come into that?
Yeah. So
right?
there are different ways people work. Some people do charge by the square foot. And similarly, how some contractors will tell you, here's the price up front. Yeah. It won't change unless you make a change.
Well,
this or that. But then there's also the contractors that give you the actual receipts and they say, and we charge a markup on that.
Yeah.
So there's different formats for each. I think it's most common to charge by the hour and to not give a set fee at the beginning because you don't know what the client's going to be like from our side of the road. That being said, I really like your point about asking as many questions up front. Ask every question up front. I personally provide a retainer letter, which has everything written out in terms of the fee structure, in terms of what happens if you change your mind, what happens if this happens, where we can help out, where we can't, things like that. What's involved and what are the discounts you might be getting from the designer? Understanding all of that is completely within your right before you hire someone. And I think, you should ask those questions and understand what you're in for, because I think that's another big misunderstanding or challenge is it's also not free. So, understand up front how much it's going to exactly.
This is not your hobby. This is your career. No, but I think that is based on conversations I've had with clients. That is the biggest intimidation factor. Like I will say, oh, I have a couple of people, here are my recommendations, and they won't call them. They're too nervous or they don't know. And again, usually on smaller levels, the bigger ones will dive in. But
so I would also say a lot of designers, myself included, offer consultations. So that's a separate service that wouldn't be like the full project. But for something like if you're deciding, should I buy this house because of how much I need to renovate? I have all these questions about what the ballpark cost might be, or what they think might need to be done in terms of like to make it my dream home. I think many designers, at least as far as I know, in terms of my peers, offer consultations, which you pay for 2 hours. They could come with you and your realtor to a viewing and give you that advice, and you pay a one-time flat fee. And then if you do buy the house and want to renovate, you can hire that designer or someone else or whatever you want. But I think there is a lot in the advice category, which is,
I do that with
pays
contractors.
itself back.
Depending on the property, I will bring contractors that I know and
Exactly.
walk through for sure. And I think that it's very similar to, for example, when you are thinking about buying a house, you want to make sure it's structurally sound, and you pay for a home inspection that's going to cost $700. So you just spent $700 to make sure it's structurally sound. And I'll do a home inspection podcast about how I feel about that one day. But, I think that when you look at the percentage of what it's going to cost for you to come out and do a consultation versus how much it's going to cost you to buy the house, likely very worth, that money to do it. Okay, great. So let's talk about, now that we've talked about how we renovate, let's talk about renovation. So I went to the home show. Did I do the home? No, I went to the interior design show. Yeah. I went to the interior design show with my my friend Miranda Caldwell. We had a blast, and there was a lot of wood. There was the white, the black was kind of out. Yeah. Didn't see that. We're going more earthy tones, terracottas. Yeah. Brass was still there. But so what are you seeing? Like what? Yeah. So that was the interior design. We know that was kind of like, there were also purple toilets and green toilets, and like, you gotta be kidding me. So, what are you seeing? Let's say that's that. Now, what are you seeing in the day to day?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're on the money in terms of a lot of warm tones are kind of coming back. The sort of gray world is receding into the background. I think trends is a touchy word at least for me. It's a bit like, okay, yes, you want to do something that feels topical and fun and, up to date and modern. You don't want your house to look dated, right. But retro comes back and all these different, it's all just one big cycle. And so it's kind of finding that balance of, can I be on trend and timeless at the same time, and finding that balance, which I think is a challenge, but should, in my mind, always be the goal. So, people are loving squiggles. Arches have been massively in.
Arches have come back.
Oh, they've been hugely back for a bit.
I love it.
And it's fun, but then you see these people building new houses and you go, oh no, you've put them everywhere. Like you just kind of took that idea and ran, and I'm like, oh my God.
So it's really interesting. We just sold a house over the weekend up in Thornhill Woods. And they bought it 20 years ago, and they upgraded when they bought this new house from the builder to have the arches. And we were talking to them maybe 2 years ago. Their condo had gotten delayed, and I thought to myself, arches are not in, right? Like I was like, it's a beautiful house. Pride of ownership, like I could not say more about. It was just so, you walked in, it was so warm. It was a fabulous house, but I noticed those details, right? Yeah, for sure. And it was warmer, like the walls were like in more of a mushroom color, and we were coming out of a spring season for the last however many years of like white walls. Like every single client I was telling them, I'm like, we need to paint your house white. Like that's just the way. Yeah. Having said that, there are other elements of that when you stage and whatever, but that's another story. But, and I was like, arches, like we really need the clean lines, this kind of thing. And we sold in 72 hours. And so interesting I would say for other reasons, but it's so interesting to look at a house that 20 years ago has now brought that, back.
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing, like the cycle comes back, and there are things that you go, okay, I can, almost pinpoint the year that was done, and that's got to go. But there are architectural elements like arches that are going to come and go.
Right.
And so I think it's really finding a balance. There are things that are, we were talking about this earlier, white kitchens. White kitchens are kind of a home run, but they're still within that, like, they're timeless, but they can
style.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
And I think a lot of people now are kind of, veering, like you said, towards a lot of wood tones. But don't panel everything. Let's keep it,
Yeah.
You've got to find the thing that you really love. Mm-hmm. And if you flip through a magazine, you'll see what's on trend. If you watch like the Emma Chamberlain YouTube Architectural Digest videos, like everything with squiggles. And that's fun. And there's lots of squiggles everywhere. And, I find it really fun. I love it. I would happily do that in a design. But I'm not going to put that in every room of a house because that will be very indicative of this year.
Right.
And, it's people love boucle. All the furniture has
all of it.
The shearling look. Great. Love the texture. Mm-hmm. Put it on one piece, layer it in there so that in 5 years you're not thinking, what did I do?
Okay, so we've got wood tones. We've got...
I'm jumping around.
No, I like it. I just want to recap it for everybody, including me.
Yeah.
Wood tones, arches.
Yeah.
I want to get into the squiggle part of it. I want to know more about that.
Yeah.
Boucle, I've seen it everywhere.
Yeah. I think the hardware you brought up, that's an interesting question because, some people think that they have to pick one metal finish for their whole home.
Right.
And, nothing, what do they sell at every store? Chrome. What looks the least nice? Chrome. You can pop it in here and there, and that's totally fine. Your lawn
gives me like a visceral
yeah, exactly.
No, but it didn't 5 years ago.
Right. And then there's, people went all in on brass, and I think there are still brass tones, and I think you can mix it in tastefully, and I think it's really warm and beautiful, and, again, fitting in with that sort of more warm story. Mm-hmm. But people have to recognize you can't just go to Amazon and order a brass thing because it could be a green brass, it could be a brown brass, it could be, there's so many, is it shiny? Is it
that brushed? I learned that also. We did when we did our main floor and we redid the stone around our fireplace, and it was like the slab of the marble had to have the vein that was warm that mixed with the brass. Yeah. And then we had a table and the table had to be replaced, and to find the right marble that had the same warm veins that went through. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. But I'm also not that person. Like I need designers because I can look at something and say, I love that, but I have no idea how to pair it with anything else.
For sure. And I think, that's the piece that I can say everything right now, and whether or not that makes sense in your mind is going to depend on the person. But with any trend, I think it's finding the balance. Integrate it in a balanced way into your home.
Okay.
Don't feel scared to do something fun, like change out, this is not news, but change out your throw pillows, change out the soft furnishings, change out those things. If you're renovating and you're doing the hard finishes, A, you better really like what you're doing, and B, don't go too all in on really anything.
Yeah, I feel like, advice for someone who is doing it, and I talk to a lot of clients, let's say like in my kind of life cycle of like kids are getting older, but like you're still going to be in that house for another 20 years and you want to renovate and, it needs a freshening up. I think there's that kind of like, where do I find that fine balance of if white and black is out now and wood is in, but I want to renovate so that I see that return on investment long term. Yeah. There's one side of the coin that says, do it for yourself. Like if you want an all out wood, like do it all out when you'll worry about it when you sell, you know? That's true. And then there's other ones who are like, no, stay classic. Right. Yeah. And so I guess, not to put you on the spot, like what would be classic? What would you say? Like if you were going to say, I'm going to say, I want to renovate my kitchen right now and I want something that's timeless.
Oh, tough question. I think within this is where this gets, nuanced. Yeah. But within everything you just said, so yes, love it. That's one piece of it, but that's totally, I understand your point. That's separate. I think you can do a white kitchen, but you don't want to go all white. You can mix in some wood tones, but, like if you mix in walnut, that's maybe not today's most popular wood, or maybe it is now that wood's kind of back in. But walnut's also very mid-century. Walnut kind of speaks to every time period. you want to pick a material that, but iced oak, that hasn't come back, and I don't think that is coming back. That was very much of its time, that sort of...
What is iced oak?
The yellow varnish on top of red oak in any like older home done in the 70s.
Oh, yeah, no. Totally.
Oh my
God,
but like that's not coming back, but people went all out on that.
But maybe it is gonna, like, maybe we don't know. Maybe it is gonna come back, right?
I mean, walnuts come back and come back.
Who knew that teak was gonna come back? Teak was like we didn't see teak for the longest time, and now teak is like the hottest thing you can like.
But you're not putting teak on everything. You're bringing in teak. Okay, well. I guess what I would say, the perfect kitchen is, if you want a colored kitchen, it's not going for the lime green. It's going for the green gray. It's going for the one that reads earthy tones. I think you said warm tones are back, but to me, earthy tones are any natural tone. So soft greens. You can even have the sort of, like you said, the warm terracottas. But if you get all the way to like a pinky color, to me, even if that's always going to make me think of my grandma's house. And so, you can have that in some ways, but you have to have it with a fresh perspective. So
or maybe it's a pink chair. Like, I think that's a really good point. So maybe you're going with like the hard materials is a little bit more classic. Mm-hmm. Like when I built our house, like granite counters were like, everybody had them. I hated granite counters, but everybody had them. So I did them. I hate my granite counter to this day. But I think going with something that's a little bit more classic, I should have done a white counter. I would have been happier with it to this day, and it would still be fine. Yeah. But maybe I did some kind of trendier thing in my furniture that can be fleshed out.
Another, not trend, but another really popular thing right now, which I'm sure you're seeing as well, is like heavily veined marble all over kitchen. You're not seeing that?
No. I'm like, it's not for me. Sorry.
No, right. So you can do that if you love heavily veined marble. Don't do that because that's a trend right now, because that is going to be a dramatic statement forever.
There's a massive designer in the city who everything she posts is this veined marble, and she's doing these huge pieces in these like multi-million-dollar homes, and all I can think is, oh my God, I hope you have money to like totally redo that house in 10 years. Because it is so... It's like I'm dating myself, but it's like right out of a Bette Midler movie. Like it is so 1980s with those tones, with the pink and and all the geometric color, like shapes, colors. And that's where it just gets a little too much. And I think people are scared. They're like, I'm going to bring a designer and I'm going to spend all this money, and then I'm going to have this outdated house.
Yeah, no, for sure. And actually going back to an earlier point, I think that's another thing to understand if you do, have the courage to call a designer, I promise it's not scary, is understanding that they're listening to you. They're not just going to cookie
That's not
cutter
always true.
pop in. But I know, but I'm saying understand that.
Sorry, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but it's true. It's not always.
No, so make sure they're going to understand you and that you align on that, because there are designers that are kind of print and repeating. And that's not to throw anyone under the bus. Maybe you want to hire that designer's look. And you're like, I want that kitchen in my house. And that's
had that as a feedback from a client also. They were like, my house looked like every other house that they did, which is fine. Again,
if that's what you want.
We all drive the same car. So I get that part, but I think that that's a very good point. And I think people need to understand that. I remember in our old house when we were trying to decide to move or not, it's a very similar process. And we had architects come in. They put together an idea, and we said, okay, so if we go through this process with you, what's the process to kind of give us your feedback if we don't like this? And they're like, there isn't one. They're like, this is our process. We recommend what we think is best, and we don't deviate. Like, this is why you hire us. And I'm like, you're not for me. Yeah. And there will be designers that are like that as well, who will say, I'm not going to work with you that way. This is how I do it. Absolutely. And I think it's important for people to understand, whether it's an architect, whether it's a designer, whether it's a real estate agent, it doesn't matter. And I feel like I want to leave us off on this is, don't be afraid to make that phone call, to ask the questions, even if it's going to cost you a few $100s. And I can tell you, I have spent, not happily as I look back on it, but I have spent tens of thousands of dollars actually on different projects to find out only that I don't want to do it. Yeah. But I would never have wanted to jump into it thinking this was a really great idea, get halfway through and go, oh my God, I just spent tenfold what I just invested, to find out that this was the wrong path, literally. So don't be afraid to invest in something like that, because it is a major project and it is a major investment. Yeah. and find the right person. It's the same with a real estate agent. It shocks me the amount of people who never speak to more than one real estate agent.
Yeah.
And by the way,
it's
somebody like
free.
me, when someone says I'm interviewing real estate agents, great, I say to them, that's fantastic. Yeah. You need to find the right person. And sometimes they don't hire me. Yeah. And that's okay. I'm not for everybody.
It's free.
But find the person. The same with designers. Pick up the phone, find out how they work, find out if they're for you, and then decide to make the decision.
Yeah. And I think you can understand also, I have had calls where it's, you know, you're my first call, I'm going to be interviewing other people.
Great.
Like, that is very common.
Go for it. By the way. Say
that is important.
Let us know. We need to work hard for our money. That's okay. So before we go, if people are trying to contact you, if they want to make that phone call, they want to find out how you work, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so everything's on my website, so megancrosbiedesign.com. I don't think there's another one of me, so if you type that in, even with some spelling errors, you'll find me.
Great.
And
Instagram.
Reach out. Instagram, same thing, at megancrosbiedesign.com, not .com, just at Megan Crosbie Design.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you very much for being with me.